In the shadowed corridors of Ottoman history, a force unlike any other shaped the destiny of an empire. The Janissaries were not just soldiers, they were an institution, a brotherhood bound by discipline and power. But their story is far from a simple tale of warriors. They were a paradox, enslaved yet privileged, protectors yet usurpers. To understand their influence, we must travel back to the heart of the Ottoman Empire, where ambition and loyalty walked a fine line. The birth of the Janissaries. The Janissaries emerged in the late 14th century under Sultan Murad I, a time when the Ottomans sought to consolidate their power in a rapidly expanding empire. They were formed through the devshirme system, a controversial practice where young Christian boys from the Balkans were taken from their families, converted to Islam, and trained as elite warriors. While this might seem like a grim fate, it offered them an extraordinary rise in status. These boys were molded into disciplined soldiers, educated in warfare, administration, and even politics. The best among them would rise to hold influential positions in the empire. Unlike traditional armies, the Janissaries were forbidden from marrying or owning personal wealth. Their lives were devoted entirely to the Sultan, making them a formidable and loyal force. At least, in the beginning. The power behind the throne. The Janissaries quickly became the Sultan's most trusted and elite fighting force, feared across Europe and the Middle East. They played a crucial role in major Ottoman victories, including the conquest of Constantinople in 1453. But their influence extended beyond the battlefield. Because they were directly under the Sultan's command and well-versed in governance, they began to shape policies, whisper in the ears of rulers, and even decide who would sit on the throne. This was not an ordinary army. It was an institution that blended military strength with political power. The Janissaries knew their worth, and over time, their loyalty began to shift, not to the Sultan, but to their own interests. The empire had created a force it could not always control. The first signs of trouble. With each passing century, the Janissaries grew bolder. They were no longer just the Sultan's bodyguards, they were kingmakers. Their influence in palace affairs deepened, and they started interfering in the selection of sultans, often forcing rulers onto the throne, or off it. What had once been a disciplined force was now a political powerhouse with its own agenda. And with power came corruption. Many Janissaries began disregarding their original code of discipline, engaging in trade, acquiring wealth, and even starting families despite earlier restrictions. They had evolved from an elite force into a powerful political entity, capable of challenging the very empire they once swore to serve. This transformation set the stage for rebellion, manipulation, and a dramatic downfall. The Janissaries had risen as protectors of the empire, but soon, they would become its greatest threat. As we delve deeper, we will uncover how these once loyal warriors became the hidden rulers of the Ottoman throne, and how their unchecked power led to their eventual destruction. From elite soldiers to kingmakers. The transformation of the Janissaries from an elite fighting force to the unseen rulers of the Ottoman Empire was not an overnight phenomenon. It was a slow, calculated shift fueled by ambition, opportunity, and a deep understanding of palace politics. What began as a disciplined military unit gradually morphed into an unstoppable force that could make or break sultans. Masters of warfare, masters of politics. Initially, the Janissaries were unmatched on the battlefield. Their rigorous training and strict discipline made them one of the most formidable military forces in the world. They were the shock troops of the empire, leading the charge in major battles and securing Ottoman dominance across vast territories. Their ability to fight in coordinated formations, their advanced use of gunpowder weaponry, and their ironclad loyalty to the Sultan made them invaluable. But as they gained experience in war, they also gained insight into the mechanisms of power. They saw firsthand how sultans ruled, how policies were crafted, and most importantly, how fragile the throne could be. They understood that the Sultan was not untouchable, he was only as powerful as those who supported him. The Janissaries as kingmakers. By the 16th century, the Janissaries were no longer just soldiers, they were political players. They realized they could influence imperial decisions, and soon, they began using their position to shape the Ottoman throne itself. If they disapproved of a sultan's policies, they would openly voice their dissent. If a ruler failed to meet their expectations, they would revolt. And if a promising candidate emerged, they would ensure his rise to power, even if it meant deposing the current ruler. One of the earliest and most infamous examples of this was in 1622, when the Janissaries orchestrated the overthrow of Sultan Osman II. The young ruler had attempted to reform them, seeing them as a threat to his authority. But the Janissaries would not tolerate such defiance. They staged a brutal revolt, stormed the palace, and ultimately executed the Sultan. This was a defining moment in Ottoman history. It was now clear that the Janissaries could remove even the most powerful ruler if they wished. The rise of a shadow government. Over time, the Janissaries expanded their influence beyond just military affairs. They embedded themselves within the empire's administration, forming alliances with court officials, viziers, and even members of the royal family. They controlled trade routes, influenced tax policies, and dictated military campaigns. In many ways, they became a shadow government operating within the empire, with their own set of interests and priorities. Their power was further cemented by their increasing economic strength. Despite the original ban on personal wealth, many Janissaries amassed fortunes through trade, bribery, and control over key industries. They established business networks, owned properties, and even wielded influence over merchants and guilds. The empire had intended them to be loyal warriors. Instead, they had become a privileged elite. The empire's growing dilemma. With every passing decade, the Janissaries grew more entrenched in Ottoman politics. Their demands increased, their rebellions became more frequent, and their interference in state affairs became an unavoidable reality. Sultans found themselves trapped between appeasing them and maintaining control over their own empire. The question was no longer about whether the Janissaries were loyal soldiers. The real question was, who truly ruled the Ottoman Empire, the Sultan, or the men who once served him? The rise of the Janissaries as kingmakers set the stage for some of the most dramatic conflicts in Ottoman history. But as their power grew, so did the threats against them. The empire could not sustain a force that had become both its greatest weapon and its greatest liability. And soon, the tide would turn against them. The hidden alliances. How they manipulated sultans. The Janissaries were not just soldiers, they were master strategists who understood that true power lay beyond the battlefield. While their rebellions and military dominance made them feared, their real strength was in the shadows, forming hidden alliances and manipulating the very rulers they were sworn to serve. Through carefully crafted relationships with viziers, palace officials, and even royal family members, they became the unseen rulers of the Ottoman Empire. The web of influence. How the Janissaries controlled the palace. In the early days, the Janissaries were meant to be loyal only to the Sultan. But as their power grew, so did their ambitions. They realized that instead of serving the throne, they could control it. Over time, they built an intricate web of influence, ensuring that every major decision aligned with their interests. One of their key strategies was infiltrating the highest levels of Ottoman politics. They formed close ties with the viziers, the empire's top administrators. Many viziers either owed their positions to Janissary support or were outright Janissary sympathizers. With these alliances, the Janissaries could dictate imperial policies without needing to stage open revolts. Even more dangerously, they began influencing the harem, the private quarters of the Sultan where political intrigue ran deep. By aligning themselves with powerful concubines and royal mothers, they gained insight into succession plans and internal palace conflicts. In some cases, they even played a role in selecting the next sultan, ensuring he would be favorable to their cause. Puppet sultans. Rulers under the Janissary grip. As the Janissaries tightened their grip on the empire, some sultans found themselves mere figureheads, forced to comply with Janissary demands or face removal. This was not just political pressure, it was survival. A weak sultan who resisted them would soon find himself overthrown or worse, executed. One striking example was Sultan Ibrahim I, who ruled in the mid-1600s. Known for his erratic behavior, he was easily manipulated by those around him, including the Janissaries. They ensured that policies benefited them, and when he became too unstable, they helped orchestrate his downfall. His execution was yet another reminder that no ruler was beyond their reach. Another case was Sultan Selim III, who attempted to reform the empire and reduce Janissary influence by creating a new, modern military force. The Janissaries saw this as a direct threat and quickly moved against him. They allied with conservative religious leaders who opposed Western-style reforms, creating a powerful coalition that led to his deposition and eventual assassination. The art of divide and rule. The Janissaries were not just kingmakers, they were masters of division. They exploited existing tensions within the empire, playing factions against each other to maintain their dominance. If a sultan grew too powerful, they would stir unrest within the ulama, religious scholars, military officers, or bureaucrats, ensuring that no one leader could challenge them alone. They also used economic leverage. By controlling key trade routes, markets, and guilds, they ensured that those who opposed them found themselves financially weakened. Merchants who resisted their influence would face sabotage or even violent retaliation. This system of manipulation ensured that no one, not the sultan, not the viziers, not even the empire's wealthiest traders, could act freely without considering the Janissaries' interests. The beginning of the end, when alliances turned against them. For centuries, the Janissaries thrived in the shadows, but their unchecked power eventually became their undoing. Their growing arrogance led them to believe they were untouchable. However, their manipulations did not go unnoticed. Sultans, viziers, and reformists began to recognize the threat they posed, and a plan was set in motion to dismantle them once and for all. Their hidden alliances, once a source of strength, became their greatest vulnerability. When Sultan Mahmud II finally decided to eradicate the Janissaries, he used the same tactics they had mastered: political maneuvering, strategic alliances, and the element of surprise. In 1826, during the auspicious incident, their barracks were surrounded, their forces annihilated, and their centuries-old stranglehold on the empire came to a bloody end. The lasting legacy of their manipulations. Even after their destruction, the impact of the Janissaries' hidden alliances lingered. They had reshaped the Ottoman Empire's political landscape, proving that an elite military force could hold more power than the throne itself. Their legacy serves as a warning about the dangers of an institution that grows beyond its intended purpose. The story of the Janissaries is not just one of military might, but of political mastery. They were warriors, but also puppeteers, pulling the strings of an empire until the day they finally became entangled in their own web. The fall of the Janissaries. Why they had to be destroyed. The Janissaries were once the mightiest force in the Ottoman Empire, unstoppable on the battlefield and untouchable in the palace. But their power came at a cost. Over centuries, they transformed from disciplined warriors into an uncontrollable elite that challenged the authority of the very empire they were sworn to protect. By the early 19th century, the Ottoman rulers realized that the Janissaries were no longer an asset but a threat. The time had come for their destruction. The empire's growing burden. The Ottoman Empire, once a superpower, was crumbling under the weight of stagnation and corruption. European powers were advancing with new military strategies and modernized armies, while the Janissaries clung to outdated traditions. Instead of adapting, they resisted change at every turn, refusing to adopt new weapons, training methods, or tactics. Their increasing defiance crippled the empire's military strength. Wars that should have been victories turned into humiliating defeats. The once feared Janissaries had become more interested in political control than defending the empire's borders. This left the Ottoman rulers with a difficult choice: continue tolerating a force that weakened them from within or risk a bloody confrontation to eliminate them. The last straw. Sultan Mahmud II's final gamble. Sultan Mahmud II understood that as long as the Janissaries existed, true reform was impossible. His predecessors had tried to contain them, to negotiate, even to bribe them into submission. All had failed. Unlike those before him, Mahmud II was not afraid of drastic measures. He had watched the Janissaries overthrow and murder his predecessor, Sultan Selim III, and he knew that any sign of weakness would mean his own downfall. Mahmud II's strategy was simple but brilliant. He would not confront them directly. Instead, he would use their own arrogance against them. In 1826, he announced the formation of a new army, the Asakir-i-Mansur-i Muhammadiyeh, or the victorious army of Muhammad, trained in modern European warfare. He claimed this force would exist alongside the Janissaries, not replace them. But the Janissaries saw through the deception. They knew that if this new army succeeded, their time would be over. As expected, they revolted once again, storming the streets of Istanbul in a show of defiance. What they didn't realize was that this time, Mahmud II was ready. The auspicious incident. The Janissaries' Day of Reckoning. On June 15, 1826, the streets of Istanbul erupted in chaos. The Janissaries, believing they could once again bend the empire to their will, gathered in their barracks, preparing for battle. But Mahmud II had set a trap. The moment they rose in rebellion, he declared them enemies of the state. The Sultan's forces, loyal to his reforms, surrounded the Janissary barracks. Cannons were rolled into position, and without hesitation, the order was given to fire. The once feared Janissaries, trapped and outmaneuvered, were massacred in their own stronghold. Those who survived the initial assault were hunted down, executed, or exiled. Within hours, an institution that had existed for centuries was wiped out in what came to be known as the Auspicious Incident. The aftermath: a new empire without the Janissaries. The destruction of the Janissaries marked the beginning of a new era for the Ottoman Empire. With their grip on power finally broken, Mahmud II wasted no time in modernizing the military and government. Western-style reforms were implemented, and the empire took its first real steps toward modernization. However, the damage the Janissaries had done could not be undone overnight. The empire had lost decades to their resistance, and the reforms came too late to restore the Ottomans to their former glory. Though the Janissaries were gone, the empire's decline continued, as European powers continued to grow stronger. The legacy of the Janissaries: fall. The Janissaries' destruction serves as one of history's greatest lessons on the dangers of unchecked power. They began as an elite force, disciplined and loyal, but their thirst for control led them to become the empire's greatest enemy. Their story is a warning about how even the strongest institutions can become corrupt and self-destructive when left unchallenged. By the time the Ottoman Empire finally rid itself of the Janissaries, the damage had already been done. Their fall was necessary, but it had come too late to save the empire they once served. Conclusion: a legacy of power and bloodshed. The Janissaries' story is one of remarkable transformation, from disciplined soldiers protecting an empire to an uncontrollable force that threatened its very survival. Their rise to power, their rebellions, their hidden alliances, and their eventual destruction paint a portrait of how unchecked power can corrupt even the most elite institutions. Their legacy is etched in the history of the Ottoman Empire, and their impact can still be felt today, offering lessons on the complexities of military influence, loyalty, and governance. A force that changed history. The Janissaries were not just a military unit, they were the architects of the empire's destiny. Their ability to shape the political landscape of the Ottoman Empire, both directly and indirectly, made them one of the most influential military forces in history. They were more than soldiers. They were power brokers, playing a pivotal role in who ascended to the throne and who fell from grace. From their beginnings as an elite, loyal fighting force, the Janissaries quickly became kingmakers. They had the power to overthrow sultans, install puppet rulers, and control the empire's most critical military decisions. While they played a crucial role in the empire's expansion and military conquests, they also sowed the seeds of its eventual decline. Their insistence on maintaining power at all costs, through rebellions, manipulations, and an ever-growing thirst for control, ultimately led to their downfall. The Janissaries' legacy is not just one of military prowess, but also of corruption and manipulation. As the centuries passed, their influence became increasingly toxic, turning them from protectors of the empire into its greatest liability. Their resistance to reform and their refusal to adapt to changing times were fatal flaws that contributed to the Ottoman Empire's inability to keep pace with modern European powers. A legacy of bloodshed. The Janissaries' rise to power came at a significant cost. The violence they instigated, whether through rebellions, assassinations, or the manipulation of royal successions, left a trail of bloodshed that stained the Ottoman Empire's history. Each rebellion, each coup, each assassination, and each execution served as a reminder of the Janissaries' immense power, but also their willingness to use violence as a tool to maintain their dominance. The auspicious incident of 1826, where the Janissaries were finally destroyed, is perhaps the most blood-soaked chapter in their story. The massacre of the Janissaries and their supporters was a final, brutal act that erased their centuries-long influence from the empire. However, this bloodshed was not without consequence. The empire, already struggling with internal strife and external pressure, was left to pick up the pieces in the aftermath. Despite Mahmud II's reforms, the Ottoman Empire was never able to fully recover from the damage the Janissaries had inflicted upon it. Lessons learned. The dangers of unchecked power. The Janissaries' story offers several important lessons on power and governance. Their rise, their reign, and their eventual fall serve as cautionary tales for any society or institution that allows power to accumulate in the hands of a few. First and foremost, the Janissaries exemplify the dangers of institutional power becoming unchecked. What began as a force meant to protect and defend the Ottoman Empire became a political machine that manipulated the highest levels of government. Over time, their power grew so vast that it became nearly impossible to control. The second lesson is the importance of reform. The Janissaries' refusal to adapt to the changing needs of the empire, both militarily and politically, was a major factor in their decline. The failure to modernize in the face of European technological advancements and military strategies left the Ottomans vulnerable to foreign powers. The Janissaries, once the pride of the empire, were ultimately responsible for hindering the Ottoman military's ability to compete with rising European empires. Finally, the Janissaries' story highlights the perils of corruption within a powerful institution. When institutions prioritize self-preservation over the well-being of the greater society, they risk becoming corrupt and self-serving. The Janissaries lost sight of their original purpose, serving the Sultan and the people, and instead became an insular, self-interested group that focused on maintaining their own power at any cost. The Janissaries in modern memory. Even though the Janissaries were eradicated in the 19th century, their legacy continues to resonate in modern memory. The term Janissary has come to symbolize not only elite military units but also the potential for military forces to overstep their boundaries and manipulate the state. In modern political discourse, the Janissaries serve as a cautionary symbol of what happens when military institutions become too powerful and begin to act in their own interest rather than in the interest of the state. The Janissaries' story also raises important questions about the nature of loyalty and duty. Their eventual betrayal of the Ottoman Empire, after decades of loyalty to the Sultan, speaks to the complexities of military service and the loyalty of elite soldiers. It challenges the notion that loyalty to a state or institution is always steadfast, and instead suggests that loyalty can be fragile, particularly when the institution itself is corrupted. In the end, the Janissaries' tale is one of ambition, power, betrayal, and bloodshed. Their legacy is a reminder of how institutions, no matter how powerful or prestigious, can fall prey to corruption and decay. It is also a reminder that power, when left unchecked, can destroy not only those who wield it but the very society it was meant to protect.